field site. Think about environmental problems that you are aware of or that your students are aware of. And as you've read through this, you probably realize, Ed, he's pretty worried about certain environmental problems, the greenhouse effect and the ozone layer. And then look what happened to him. Environmental problems exist all around us, and their effects are complex and they are difficult to understand. Environmental issues are also very complicated due to the multiple processes and the different stakeholders and viewpoints that get involved. And trying to solve these environmental problems become quite complex. So therefore, our students may feel a bit overwhelmed on how they can understand and approach maybe solving some of these environmental problems that exist in their communities. So again, Hands on the Land is a project of Partners in Resource Education. They are an alliance of federal agencies that manage our public lands and waterways, as well as partnerships within the EPA, the Department of Education, and also NEF, the National Environmental Education Foundation. So our overview today is to highlight how our Hands on the Land has revised our Hot Topics resource area of the website. And we recognize that as Hands on the Land members, that outdoor and hands-on learning experiences can engage students with environmental stewardship opportunities, as well as to develop competencies that students will need to address as citizens in regard to environmental issues. So again, featured with this webinar today will be Hands on the Land's revised Hot Topics resource area. And we're going to provide you with some activity ideas and some case studies on how to bring environmental problems and issues into the classroom and to life in the context of hands-on outdoor programs. So this is Hands on the Land revised Hot Topics listing. The Hot Topics were meant to provide current and accurate information that support agency resource management objectives. Now, is this an all-inclusive list? Certainly it's not. As you read down the list, we have energy for the future, climate change, water, watershed, habitat. We also have organized our habitat areas to include ocean and marine, forest, grassland and range, wetlands, and then ecosystem processes. These are environmental problems that may affect habitats, wildland fire, invasives, pollinators. And then at the bottom of this list, we see heritage. And it's very important to recognize that with many of our public lands, especially national parks and national monuments, that the preservation of the past, our cultural history, becomes an issue in these areas in regard to perhaps the public perception of these areas, the issue of getting into these areas. There's sometimes problems with looting and etc. So we have a list here, but I certainly want to make it clear that this is not an all-inclusive list. And then this wonderful graphic organizer that Dave Zelenka created for the website shows all of the interconnections, because we can't simply think of environmental problems or issues in a box. They're very much interconnected. For example, I can think of how pollinators interacts to a large degree with climate change, and as the effects of warming climates, it's changed the nature of our habitats with the blooms of certain flowers and how the pollinators have not been able to come in and food supplies are affected, etc. So hopefully you can see that as well, that we are presenting maybe a couple of the hot topics today with our case studies, but certainly there's a lot of latitude for implementing your own hot topics, environmental problems and issues based on where you are located. And I want to make a real big plug here for one of the hot topics. I think this is really going to be a great program. Climate Change Live is launching off their distance learning adventure, and they will have a webinar tomorrow in the evening, 7:30 to 9. And go to that website if you are interested in becoming involved or getting some of the information. They're going to have some wonderful presentations throughout the school year and some wonderful resources to share with you in regard to climate change. Well, let's take a look at our students. How do students learn about environmental problems? Or how do our regular citizens like Ed, the regular guy, learn about environmental problems? Well, I put this slide together. It looks a little silly, but A lot of times people will simply Google something or go to Wikipedia and find out what they can about a particular topic. I particularly like the National Enquirer Environmental Nuts Want to Recycle Human Corpses as a way to learn about environmental issues. But the fact is, is this the best way to learn about environmental issues, or could there be a better way by actually using the context or place-based learning with our public lands and waterways? Also with students, they can learn about topics. Here's one from an old t-shirt that I've had called 100% Endangered. Well, you're right, endangered species would definitely be an important environmental topic. However, when in my classrooms I've begun an environmental issues project, I'll get students very concerned about, let's say, the sea turtle. And that's great. And they'll say, Mrs. Smith, we want to save the sea turtles. And I'll say, that's a great undertaking and it's a very noble cause. But we're in Colorado, we're in a landlocked state. How can I engage or spark the learning of my students with environmental problems that are right in their own backyard? And it's unfortunate today that students are becoming more and more unaware or removed in their understanding of environmental problems that may exist in their own communities or nearby public lands or waterways. So again, what we want to emphasize with this process is place-based learning and learning about environmental problems in the context of place. So get out your pens and pencils and papers because there's a few terms that I want to go through with you that might also help you to develop an environmental issues project. And I'm just kidding about the pen and paper. This webinar will be recorded. So if I'm going too fast, and I know with webinars it's really hard to gauge, you have a lot of information to get out in a short amount of time, but we are recording this webinar. So feel free to go back into the webinar when it gets posted on the Hands on the Land, website. So here's our first term, and I've been using it over and over again. It's a topic. So this one's sort of easy. A topic is an overarching theme or category, the overriding or umbrella theme. And as I mentioned, Hands on the Land has been revising their hot topics on the website. The next topic that I've been using is a problem. And we can say this is a situation or a condition that's related to the topic in which something becomes threatened or is at risk. And it's real important when you look at the remaining part of this definition that there is evidence to support that the problem exists. In other words, everyone needs to agree that the problem is out there. A way I use this for students and in the professional development programs that I teach, I say, remember about the Apollo 13 situation, Houston, we have a problem. And everyone in remembering that historical situation will easily recognize that there was a problem and the evidence supported that. So that is very important to understand that a problem means that all the stakeholders involved that have concerns or interests with that problem do agree that a problem exists. Now, regretfully, this is oftentimes where textbooks stop. They will simply present a topic, perhaps an environmental topic, and the problem, and then it stops. And that's because this next term, coming up, issue involves controversy or disagreement. And a lot of times textbooks don't want to go there, but it's necessary. Controversy or disagreement, in other words, all these stakeholders that have different viewpoints or different opinions about the causes of an environmental problem. And certainly what should be done. How might the problem have been prevented? What are the solutions, long-term effects, and certainly costs? How are we going to pay for some of the mitigation or remediation of the environmental problems? So these are the three terms that we're going to be working with. And if you still have your pencil and paper handy, I'm going to share with you some very, very simplified examples of how to help the flow of understanding with these particular terms. So here's example one. So what I've done is I've put up some information with problem and issue, something about bears. But what is missing is the topic. So I want you to read through the problem and the issue. And oftentimes the issue is presented as a question. And that's what I've done with a couple of the examples here. But I want you to think about what would be an appropriate topic to go with this example. Let's see what you came up with. This might be a possible topic, simply habitat, or it could be that wildlife management becomes the topic. And it's interesting, I work with one of the wildlife managers in my area quite frequently, and he says, you know, Gail, it's not that we try to manage the wildlife. I think we try to manage the humans that enter into enter into wildlife habitat. So whatever the perception, it is quite interesting. So let's stick with this topic with habitat. It's a bear habitat. The problem is we have a number of bears getting into trash containers, and that population of bears has been increasing the past 3 years, getting into this campground. And the issue formed as a question, or stated as a question, is what is causing the number of bears getting into the trash containers? So let's go to another example. I kept the topic the same, but take a look and see when you read through the problem and the issue if there's any miscues about the problem. So read through that for a moment and see what you think. Remember when we define the terms, and more than likely, you came up with this word. The word forcing. Bears are forcing their way into campgrounds and getting into trash and causing damage to trash containers. So it's a pretty loaded word. I don't feel that, and you might agree with me that, people would be in agreement that bears are forcing their way. So I don't think we have evidence that the bears forcing their way in is the problem. Take a look at the issue. I changed this a little bit. I changed the question to, what are ways to prevent bears from getting into trash at public campgrounds? Does anyone know what this is? Well, you might recognize it, as I have, from our national park system. I was recently at Great Sand Dunes National Park and Preserve, which is in Colorado. And this is a bear locker. Well, actually, it's a camper locker. And the campers put their food and their coolers, trash into this supposedly bear-proof locker. And it's hard to kind of recognize how this would work, but there's a little handle that is attached to a loop, and you bring the handle up and it goes on the little nut there. There's directions on how to work this, but apparently it's pretty bear-proof. As long as the campers are mindful of putting their coolers and food and trash in this container, it helps solve the problem of bears getting into the campground. And it just reminds me of Yogi Bear. Is this smarter than the average bear? So again, that was a very simplified example of using our terminology of topic, problem, and issue with this scenario. But in moving on, I think we need to have a word about biased viewpoints. So what you're seeing on your screen is this beautiful owl. It's the northern spotted owl. And if you've been in education for as long as I have, you might recall that in about, mid-70s or so, when a lot of the environmental education or conservation education materials were being outlaid, in northern or the northwest part of our nation, where the northern spotted owl's habitat is, there were teachers teaching students about logging and the horrible effects of clear cutting and logging. And if you cut down all the trees, there will be no more habitat for the northern spotted owl. And so the student will go home at the end of the school day and, well, what did you do at school today? I learned how cutting down trees is so horrible for the northern spotted owl. Well, just imagine the family whose livelihood depends on the logging industry, the mother and father whose paycheck comes from the timber industry in a particular community. So back at that time, when these type of materials were being outlaid, I think we started to recognize that it's probably best to come up with ways to help our students understand environmental literacy, environmental problems, the stewardship that we're trying to encourage them to have on our public lands in a way that's non-biased, that we should allow students to understand the issues themselves. Also, when we think about sustainability, and believe me, I could do a whole nother webinar on sustainability, but if you look at the 3 E's of sustainability in this model, we have environment, social equity, and economic. And take that example of the spotted owl. Well, to save the habitat for the spotted owl, that might be really great for the environment, but it becomes off balance in terms of social equity, people having jobs, and the economics, the costs of a particular community. And so we need to consider with environmental issues the different stakeholders' perspectives and viewpoints. And that's what makes this very complex on working with environmental issue topics. Here's another way that you might consider, especially those of you that are classroom teachers, a way to begin teaching or using an environmental issue project approach. Something that I've done over the years is to simply find newspaper articles or ask students or participants in my workshops to bring in newspapers. And what they do is they look through the newspaper and they try to find an article that might have something connected with an environmental problem. Now, some of you have heard that Colorado recently had some major flooding. So I took a snapshot of the Denver Post recently about this flooding. So what you do is give the newspapers out or make copies of articles. Another great way, since newspapers are almost obsolete these days, is use some video clips from newscasts from television and have them listen or read through. And what they do is then identify, they can work with teams or partners or do it on their own, and they start to identify, well, what would I consider to be the environmental topic related to this article that I'm reading or that I viewed on TV? What would be the environmental problem? And then what would be the issue? And what you find is, after discussing these, so many different possible ways of looking at this. And so be prepared to understand that your students will have different perspectives themselves. There's really no right or really no wrong answers to these. For example, with the floods in Colorado, the topic they might come up with might easily be, oh, it's a water-related topic. Well, yes, it is. It's a water quality topic. Yes, with all the flooding, much of the water quality in northeastern part of Colorado has been greatly affected. Some students may say, you know, I think it's an environmental, it's a human health issue. And that's exactly right, because many of the water treatment plants or sewage treatment plants have been compromised because of the flooding. Some students may come up with habitat as the topic. That would be correct also. What about climate change? What if students put climate change in as their topic? Would that be incorrect? So it's just something to think about, how students come in with their own viewpoints and perspectives, and then how you can engage that understanding and moving on with what are the problems, and then most importantly, what are the issues? How are these flooded areas going to reach, a way that is safe for people to have homes, to be safe, to have clean water again, and it goes on and on with the issue. So what I'd like to present now, since we've had a little bit of background on topic, problem, and issue, is a case study that I've used here in Colorado. And it involves healthy forests. A few years ago, I had a middle school student that said, Mrs. Smith, I am really concerned about our forests here in the mountains. I keep looking at all of these dead trees, and I'm really concerned that there won't be healthy forests in my future. And that really spearheaded my thought that, the students are concerned about this. Let's involve them on understanding forest health a little more deeply. Let's use the context of the forest that's in their community, and let's learn about this topic. And what they had heard is that the mountain pine beetle was killing off acres and acres, millions of acres of their forest. So this is a scene that shows what our forests typically look like here in the West. So what we did is went to Keystone Science School. We went into the forest. It was wintertime. The students cross-country skied, and we really started to understand more in depth about the environmental problem due to the mountain pine beetle. The students really didn't understand about forest diversity. They didn't know a lot about the ecology of the forest, how forests regenerate. So we had to really get that background of understanding in a hands-on way. And of course, they loved it because they were outside and having a lot of fun. And they learned more about the mountain pine beetle itself. They began to understand the life cycle of the mountain pine beetle. They realized, I think most importantly, that mountain pine beetle is not an invasive species. Many of them thought these were, invaders from some other place. And we went, no, mountain pine beetles have been around. This is their habitat. And they said, well, what are the predators of the mountain pine beetle? Well, the woodpecker. So they started to begin to understand a little bit more in depth about the dynamic balance of a forest, and
Please
that in
pardon the interruption. Your conference contains less than 3 participants at this time. If you would like to continue, press star 1 now, or the conference will be terminated.
Oh, sorry for the interruption there, that the dynamic balance of the forest had been thrown off, and that what are we going to do to maybe mitigate this problem with the forest? What were the causes? Why was the population really becoming so incredibly large and killing off so many acres of trees? Was it due to the history of the logging? Was it due to the history of fire suppression in this type of forest? Was it due to climate change? So what the students began to develop were some inquiry questions like this one. What should be done to maintain forest health due to the impact of the mountain pine beetle? This shows a picture of spraying some sort of pesticide onto the trees, and the students had to do a little bit of research to find out if this technique was effective
Please
or not.
pardon the interruption. Your conference contains less than 3 participants at this time.
One
If
thing
you
that
would
they
like to
did
continue,
do
press star 1 now, or the conference
understand
will be
that
terminated.
the students, in order for them to solve the mountain pine beetle problem, they never came up with a direct solution. And this is something for you to understand, that more than likely students, will not be able to directly solve a problem, but they certainly will become more engaged. And so what I did is have the students become stakeholders, and we did a little bit of role playing. So I had some of the students role play that they were working with the U.S. Forest Service or the State Forest Service. Some
Please
of them
pardon the
were
interruption. Your
real estate
conference contains less
developers,
than 3 participants at this time. If
were
you would
ski
like to
area
continue, press
operators,
star 1 now, or the
because
conference will be
this
terminated.
mountain pine beetle definitely affects our ski areas. Some of the student participants were role playing fire departments, being on the fire department force. And so we had a little town meeting. And what we were trying to do is reach consensus with all of these different stakeholders and role play through the role play on what could be done about the mountain pine beetle.
The
What were the
conference is being
costs?
terminated.
Should we clear cut the forest? Should we, spray the forest? Here's another way that you can introduce environmental issues into the classroom. The Lorax by Dr. Seuss. Hopefully you're familiar with this. And these slides are a little bit fuzzy. And the reason for that is I've got some old slides that I've had for many, many years. But if you're familiar with this story, it's about forest health
You
as
are the
well.
first caller to the conference. Please wait while others join.
And I have used the Lorax everywhere from elementary to college level. In fact, currently I'm using the Lorax, the story, for a college level systems thinking course. But if you recall the story about the Lorax, we've got the Lorax, I speak for the trees. Trees are things that everyone needs. And these are the truffula trees in the forest. And the Onceler comes in his wagon and is thinking of the opportunity that these truffula tufts have for the forest and what he can make from these beautiful truffula tufts. So he creates a factory to knit thneeds from the truffula tufts, and then over time, the forest is depleted, that resource is depleted, there's a lot of pollution, and the habitat has been destroyed. So again, I've used this all the way up through college level to think about this dynamic balance, coming up with solutions to this environmental issue presented by Dr. Seuss's The Lorax. And when we look at the sustainability triangle again of the truffula forest and the manufacturing of the thneeds, how might this scenario been improved as far as dynamic balance and equilibrium? How could the environment, social equity, and economic become sustainable for the onceler's needs? Now, this webinar would not be complete without a quick word about STEM and some standards. I want to make another plug for a book that I've been reading. It's called The Case for STEM, Education Challenges and Opportunities, and you can get it from NSTA Press. And it's by Roger Bybee. And if you are also thinking now as a classroom teacher or maybe a field site manager, well, this is great. Environmental issues project would be wonderful, but how do I connect that with standards? I really encourage you to read this about STEM and STEM related issues. He says STEM related issues such as energy efficiency, climate change, or hazard mitigation necessitate the development of competencies students need in order to address these issues as citizens. And then I have the website addresses for the next generation science standards or the core standards, and take a look at those. I think you'll find it quite easy to integrate these environmental issues with the topics, problems, and the issues themselves into the regular curriculum. And I would also like to give a plug for another book that just came out, hot off the press, is this book called Citizen Science, 15 Lessons. It is also from NSTA Press, and there are lessons that really bring this idea of stewardship and environmental literacy to the forefront using citizen science. And our very own Susan Sachs, who works at the Great Smoky National Park, has a couple of her lessons actually in this book. She has the terrestrial invertebrates and the ozone biomonitoring in the book. And if you participated in our webinar back last November, Susan Sachs was one of our presenters with her lichen monitoring project. And then lo and behold, right after I realized that this book had come out, the National Park Service has also got a wonderful website where you can watch and have students watch some movies that bring to the forefront some of these environmental issues as well. And Susan Sachs is again one of the featured presenters on one of the movie podcasts, and it's on the phenology citizen project that she's been doing in the Great Smoky National Park. So with that, and I know that I've gone very quickly, I am going to turn it over to Dave Zelenka, who is also going to be presenting a case study that he has been involved in regard to an environmental problem and issue. So Dave, if you are ready, I think we're going to have you go ahead, and I will mute my microphone.
Okay, I'm ready. Thank you very much, Gail.
All right, thanks, Dave.
And by the way, everybody, if you have any questions, feel free to write them down and or put them in the chat for us. We will answer questions. We'll hopefully have about 10 minutes or more at the end of this webinar to answer any questions you all might have. But I want to start talking about the Elwha River restoration. One of the hats that I wear is I work as a teacher here in the Port Angeles School District during the summer, and I teach a field course about the Elwha. And I've lived out here since the early 1990s, and at first I was a park ranger out here and an interpretive park ranger. And so I've been following this issue for about 20 years now, and we've finally started taking out the dams. The reason it's an interesting case study for classrooms and students and hot topics is it's really a big issue in our community, or it was when the dams existed, and it still is to a certain degree. But the issue was important for a variety of people: the tribe, the park, people who worked for the mills, people who enjoyed boating and recreation on the lakes. So it was a difficult sell to get these dams out, and it was also pretty expensive. So it was an interesting study for us to have students coming out in the field and learning about these dams and the restoration process before they were actually removed, and now afterwards. So here's, on the left is the Elwha Dam. You can see it down there. On the right is the Glines Canyon Dam. A full 100 years ago, this year, the dam was finished its construction. And now it's had its life cycle, and it's has been all the way removed. The Glines Canyon Dam is there's still a little bit of it remaining in the upper area, but this one's all the way through, and there's already salmon coming through. You can see salmon coming up in little tributaries, and even in the main stem of the river up above this dam now this fall. So the program that we teach is run out of the North Olympic Peninsula Skills Center. So it's kind of a vocational school, and it's partnered with the Park Service and the local school district. So students who take the summer course, 15-day course, they get a science credit. Some of the students that take the class depend on that science credit to pass. So and then we also have students that are high achievers. So we have a huge spectrum of students that come out. Up to 16 students per class, and we've been doing this for 4 years now. This is my 3rd year doing it this summer. Hands-on, inquiry-based. We're out in the field for most of those 15 days. We also have, in the partnership with the Park Service, we have a ranger, an interpretive ranger, education ranger, who comes out with us and helps to learn and to teach about the Elwha River restoration. We also do service learning, where we meet with researchers and scientists, and lastly, we use the custom databases and blogging tools that are on Hands on the Land. But before I go any further, I'm going to take us over to, I'm going to try to share my screen here on a video, and so the students can actually tell you a little bit more about what they do.
Now you can be out in your field and not be out stuck in a classroom. And got it. That I actually learned a lot of stuff in this class than I do just in regular science class.
Well, I like being out in the field a lot more in the classroom just because it's like a lot more hands-on work. Like it's easier to learn because you get to see everything, like your surroundings and stuff. When you're just reading books and stuff in the classroom, you're not really, you're just looking at it, you know, like you're not like being there for real.
Started with the land treader kind of work, and today we went to Hurricane Ridge, and we went to a few different locations. They're called polygons, these little areas, and we charted out what we thought had happened in the past, like what had occurred at those locations to maybe change the landscape change.
Okay, so right here is the wetness graph, and it's for this polygon. So it shows like up here is how it's more wet, and down here is it's less wet. So down here are the years that show like its wetness, and you can tell that the major event happened right around here because the dots are changing color and then moving to a different place.
If someone's not taking care of the fish, then who's going to take care of them, or who's going to keep up with the population that's out there, or what's going on if their habitats are being destroyed by when the dam is taken down and stuff like that.
And I think that's useful to release the fish into the river so that they can survive there and people can fish them and stuff. But I don't know if it'll necessarily work, how well it'll work in the future. It's the only thing I thought about it.
Figure out how and when to remove things and doing all kinds of experiments on what can be replanted, on what has been stripped away, because now there used to be lakes and now they're not there anymore, and it's just river flowing through, and so I find that very interesting and surprising and exciting.
Well, working with young people is really fun, and I work in education and outreach, which means I'm kind of acting like a teacher, but when I teach people things, I'm actually learning myself, so I think that's pretty cool. It's something I enjoy. So also when I'm working with students or younger people, they're more inclined to ask questions about things, and so through finding those answers, I learn more as well.
Well, I had some fun in the water, but I decided I didn't have waders, so I just kind of decided to go with my
Okay, well that's our little video there. It was really a joy to take part in this class for the past 3 years. As difficult as it has been, it's always fun with the students, but it's always a great challenge too. Okay, so let's use Gail's little her method for determining what the topic and the problem and the issues are for this particular project. Well, some might say it's watersheds, and some might say it's habitats. Is the broader topic here for the Elwha River restoration. What's the problem? Well, there's multiple problems. Before the dams were removed, there was no fish passage, which was a legal requirement at the time when the second dam was made. There was a sediment-deprived lower river, so there was the smaller and larger sediment were not moving down the river because of the dams, and the dams were aging. Issues. Again, multiple issues. There was what to do with the local energy needs when the dams were removed. How about boating? People loved fishing and boating in the lakes. There was a water treatment issue because the Port Angeles water for both the public and industry comes from the Elwha, and the issue of flood protection because the dams provide that. So out in the field, I think this is a great example of a project that could be applied to other sites across the nation. So that's one reason I really wanted to promote it, because the students get to go out, they get to learn, they get to do service learning. In this case, they were allowed to help collect seeds and replant plants for the revegetation project. And they also conducted hands-on field science in the field that hopefully actually helped out the scientists and researchers here at the park. They also did inquiry-based projects, their own little personal projects that helped them really to get to know the site personally. The student over on the left, or the two students on the right, actually, they were really into their benthic macroinvertebrate study that they did along the Elwha. And it was pretty interesting because they got to watch how there was very few benthic macroinvertebrates where the sediment was filling the river, but then in other places up above the dams there were a lot more of those invertebrates. One thing I like to emphasize when I teach hot topics or key issues like this is just the facts. If we provide the facts are going to tell the story. And also, we don't get our biases in the way. So when we do observations, we make clean, crisp, fact-based observations. We're going to get the data, and the data is going to tell the story. We don't even have to. Of course, with this project, as with all projects where you involve actual scientists, you're going to have real STEM opportunities. In this case, on the left, Alicia is learning how to do radio tracking. We were with a wildlife biologist that works for the local tribe here, and she was teaching us about how to track otters in the river. And then up on the right, we see our students helping out with the landscape change dynamics project, where we were working with Robert Kennedy from Oregon State University with his land trender. He has a program that crunches Landsat data and then pops out graphs, and then we were checking the graphs to see if they actually matched reality. So we would go out in the field, we would check the graphs on the computer, and then we'd go out in the field to see if what the computer thought happened at that particular polygon actually happened there. So it was a fascinating STEM connection. And of course, we did general water quality monitoring in the river, and that taught us about how technology works and doesn't work. It seems like each year we have some technical problems when it comes to that, but that's just part of doing science. I want to make a plug for our custom databases on Hands on the Land. We have our hot topic observations database, and basically it allows students who take journals in the field, classrooms who take journals in the field and record observations, whether that be photographs or actual just text or narrative observations. They can come back in the classroom and post those observations with a Latin long into our database. So far, we only have Olympic National Park using this tool, but it is available for other member sites. Basically, you just need to just need to be registered with Hands on Land, and you can go in and post that data. It also allows us to emphasize the idea of observations, facts versus fiction. So students can actually learn how to make fact-based observations, and because that's what the database is all about. We also use a plant recolonization database. That's a custom database on Hands on Land. We collected data in the actual basins to find out what's growing there or what's not growing there after the dams have been removed. So next year, when we have the students out there, we're going to do the exact same transects and plot the data, and so the students next year will be able to compare with what it was like this year. And hopefully we can do that as throughout the years to get this program going. We may have Jay Johnstone online right now, and he has worked with us to develop a custom database. We also, like Gail was talking about, we have Susan Sachs who's developed some custom databases for Hands on the Land, and we also have one that tracks phenology trends up for the University of Alaska. And in all cases, these are citizen science and usually classroom-based projects. So it's nice to have students to be able to come in, to graph, to post their data, to actually work in the field. Inquiry-based work. I think when you have hot topics, one of the best things to do is to have students be able to ask their own personal questions about the ecology. So in our project, our 15-day project, we had students learn initially about the Elwha, and then they'll ask a question. We'll have we have groups go out and ask a question, and then they can do field work to try to answer their questions. This student, Caleb, and his group did asked a question about woody debris and about these log jams and what their purpose is in the Elwha River restoration process. They found out that they're used by the fish for shade, and they are also used by plants as the plants will start to recolonize. They will use the woody debris to start to form little islands of vegetation, which is really pretty interesting. And of course, all of our land managers become better teachers when we're out in the field with students, because we actually have to explain these ideas that are sometimes pretty complex. So since we have scientists and researchers out in the field with our students, they learn how to communicate to a diverse audience, because we have high achievers and low achievers in our class, and achievers that come from logging and fishing community families who have diverse perspectives about what should have happened with the Elwha. So it allowed them to interact with the students, which was taught us all great lessons. And one thing I like to emphasize in my class is to have fun, because when the students have a good time and they enjoy the environment and they learn how to work also, to emphasize that, they will go back to their families and they will provide that information. Oh, I had a great time. Oh, I learned so much. Oh, here's what I learned, to their families. And that is an awesome outreach to the local community and helps to build the bonds that maybe have broken or severed over time because of the divisiveness of some of these issues. So I'm hopeful that this class and the fun that the students had will actually make a positive uh, um, interaction between the community and the local national park here. So that's all I have about here. I think Gail might want to take over now and talk a little bit more about hot topics on Hands on the Land and how you can be more involved. And also remember your questions. We'll have a few minutes here, it looks like, to answer some questions. You there, Gail? Audio?
Yes, I'm now here. Thank you, Dave. I just love that part of the video that you put together at the end where the girl is dumping the water out of her boots. That is just great. It's just such a great visual there. And it did look like a lot of fun. So thank you for sharing that wonderful case study with the Elwha. I want to wrap up here with this slide specifically for our field site managers that you need to maybe think about going back into your field site profile and filling out that hot topics tab. Maybe more specifically, maybe outlining in your particular area with your field site what the environmental topics may be, the problems, the issues. I think you can see how by having this filled in a little more completely, how we might be able to engage our students and our teachers when they start reading through these site profiles and recognizing the common threads and the common strands that exist across the nation with these particular environmental problems. So what you're seeing here is from the Olympic National Park. It is their particular field site profile. Thank you, Dean Butterworth. I think you might be one of our participants today for completing this. But again, it's an important tab. It's one of our new ones with the field site profiles that we put on this year for Hands on the Land. But take some consideration with today's presentation on how you might be able to clarify and go into a little bit more depth about your specific environmental problems and issues that you have. And even if it involves the heritage piece, the preservation of our past, that cultural history that is so important to our many national parks and monuments, that's included as hot topics as well. And don't feel that your hot topics and your particular sites have to exactly match those of the Hands on the Land resources. They might be much more specialized, or you might want to fine tune them, and that is just absolutely fine. So we encourage you to go back in and complete this area. And again, the whole reason why this came up and why we're doing this webinar today is Hands on the Land and PRE, the agencies that work collaboratively together, have just recently revised this hot topic resource area. So please take some time to go to the Hands on the Land website. And what you'll see on the home page is this box that says Hot Topics. And when you click on that, it'll take you directly to the Hot Topics page, and you'll see that wonderful integrated graphic organizer trying to show all of the interconnections with the hot topics that we have. And I just want to share a little bit of how we put this together. If you can imagine, I had content coming to me from BLM and EPA, Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, National Park Service, NOAA, and marine sanctuaries. And so they were giving me this wonderful set of content to put on our revised Hot Topics page. And it became a little overwhelming for me too. And it wasn't until I was able to sort through all this wonderful content and all these wonderful resources that I had the aha experience to organize it by topic, problem, issue. And that is what you'll find on our webpage. It'll give some background information about all of our hot topics, what specific problems might be that relate to those environmental topics, and then the issues that also are very complex as they relate to those hot topic environmental problems. But most importantly, we have a section on each of these hot topics called Learn More and Get Involved. And what we've done is put numerous links in which, as teachers and students looking through our hot topics section, you can find out a lot more information in regard to these hot topics to learn more, and also with some citizen science areas to get more involved. So I encourage all of you as participants today to take a look at this revised area of the Hands on the Land website. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised and hopefully will be able to utilize it. And I think if we have any questions, we have a few minutes that we can answer some questions. And I'm seeing that one is possibly coming up. Do you see it, Dave, as yet?
I see that we have a couple questions being typed right now. So.
Right.
Anna Marie says, we have a great program developed, but we have problems recruiting students. Any ideas? High school students. That's a good question. I was not involved with the initial setup of this class. Dean Butterworth was. He's actually typing something. He might be able to respond. But I think one of the key issues for us is that the students got a half a science credit for our class. And it fills up every year, every summer because of that. They get to fulfill their half credit of science that they might not be able to take otherwise, or they might want to take music or something like that. So they'll take the summer class in order to get students out there. And Louise Jensen, similar question: were summer students directed into the program or chose it as an elective? Well, some of them use it as an elective, but some of them actually use it as a science credit. Yeah, and yes, that was definitely the key. Dean Butterworth says recruitment was difficult. We talked to guidance counselors. We asked students to talk the program up to their friends. Yeah, that's, honestly, the word of mouth within the student world, that is really key. And that's that's another reason we need to have it. These programs really need to be fun. It's sometimes when you're collecting hard science and real data, it's not fun, but you have to make it as fun as possible.
Thanks, Dave, and I'll respond to that as well. I've worked more with middle school students and the same type of situation, getting them engaged and involved. But the more that I've been able to make this type of learning contextual, what am I learning? Why am I learning it? And how am I going to use it? It really tends to engage the students more and more into wanting to do more inquiry-based learning, more project-based learning. Once they know that there's a purpose. Anytime with the citizen science aspect of these projects that students recognize that the value of the data they're collecting is going somewhere, that it's actually being used by public land managers, it really tends to keep them involved because they feel a part of coming up with maybe solutions to some of these environmental problems. Anything else, Dave, on the chat?
Looks like a couple people are talking in here right now. We also had a number of students who just wanted to take the class because they liked the idea of doing field work, and maybe their parents wanted them to take the class to get them outside. And how you market is a difficult thing in a community. Oh yeah, Dean also talks about the internships. A number of the students moved on into internships after the class through the North Olympic Peninsula Skills Center. And if you really want to find out more about how to get one of these things done in your area, I would talk to Dean Butterworth and also Daniel Lieberman. He at the North Olympic Peninsula Skills Center. He really is the genius behind this program, and so he's someone to talk to how he got it going. And Marie says, do you know of any programs that get teachers out on the land? Don't know about, I know there's a lot of professional development programs out there, but I can't tell you anything offhand right now. Maria Boots talks about getting elementary students. In our area, we have an institute. It used to be called Olympic Park Institute. Now it's called Nature Bridge, and they run programs with elementary students in our area. And of course, the Park Service, Dean Butterworth, they go out to classrooms, and they have classrooms come out to the park also.
And I can speak to elementary level also. And I think it's also the connection that we can get a little more strongly with our public lands and what we're really trying to accomplish with Hands on the Land, get those connections to our classroom teachers. You know, a lot of elementary teachers may not have the background of experience to involve students in an environmental issues project. So really make those connections as much as you can with your public schools. Teachers should be pretty well versed with their standards and their curriculum, and they can start to look at, you know, how can they use the content standards that they have and utilize in the public lands or the community public parks around them to teach to those standards. And it doesn't have to be as involved as some of the citizen science that you've seen. With elementary students, it can be as easy as observation. Again, using literature, I've used, as I said before, the Lorax so many times with elementary students, just so they start to understand the complexity of what environmental issues involve. Any other questions? I think there's some delays in which when people are typing.
Yeah, just one little note. Candace has a question about books or contacts to inspire students to join in. You know, there's a lot out there. The question is doing a good Google search, and I don't have any specifics for you right now. And Dean Butterworth says, what resources are teachers coming to the HOL website for, and how can we provide them for? The Hands on website really, it's kind of interesting because it gets a lot of hits from people searching for content through Google. The key is for our site managers to post their content on our website, on the Hands on website. So if you have resources available, think of Hands on Land as a marketing device. You can post content in our educator resources database. You just log in and post. If you need help, you can get me to help you out. You can also post your content in your site profile. So there's a number of ways you can do that. You can post to our blog, Hands on Land blog, if you want to market a new product that you have. So use Hands on Land as a marketing device. Anybody else in the industry, if you have free web space where you can post content, it's a great way to build up the power of your links through Google indexing. So use Hands on Land to post your content.
That's great, Dave. That's a really good point. And I think one of our next steps, one of the next projects that tends to come right after this resource revamp of the hot topics is our educator resources area. We also have a huge database of educator resources right on the website, as Dave Zelenka just mentioned. So if you're a field site manager and you were part of this presentation today, take that to heart. Please get back in there, update your hot topics, your field site profile in general with the hot topics, and then do include those resources because that's what educators may be looking for. They may be wanting to find out how you might approach teaching invasive species at your field site, and you might have some activities that teachers could use. And that might be very, very helpful for them to begin to work with their curriculum and getting the students involved with public lands. Let's see if there's anything else. Oh, Candace did ask a link to a video to inspire students to join in. Again, I had that one video with National Park Service, or that one link where National Park Service is starting to put some wonderful videos. But if you simply, with some of the YouTube videos or find some newscasts, students particularly I found over the years of doing environmental issues projects get engaged in topics that are human health related. So if you have some current events that are happening in your community or in the public lands nearby, try to find articles about that. Dave's link I see is putting some video links there now. And they're not that hard to find, but again, do watch for biases. One of the funny things we've done with our professional development conferences when we use the newspapers is people will take the editorial page and try to use that. And I'm like, no, that's pretty opinionated since it is the op-ed section. So we want to try to present this in a non-biased way, have students use their inquiry questions and come up with information, collecting their own data to support their understandings of these environmental problems. All right, am I missing anything, Dave? Oh, we had elementary students, we got that one.
I think we're good to go.
All right, well, again, thank you everyone for taking some time out of your afternoon to participate in our Hot Topics webinar. I think I have learned a lot through this process of organizing all this wonderful content and resources that our public lands and waterways offer to us through our federal agency. So please take some time when you can to go to the Hands on the Land website at handsontheland.org and take a look at that Hot Topics page. And we thank you, and we hope that you have a wonderful rest of your week. Please don't forget that this Saturday on September 28th is National Public Lands Day. It is the 20th anniversary of that. So a good way to kick off or kickstart your understanding of getting students involved with public lands is coming up this weekend on National Public Lands Day. So I'm going to sign off. Again, thank you, everybody. It's been a great webinar. Thank you.